Yeah.
Man,
I don't have the badonk to call myself Moth Woman, so.
no comment.
So, are you ready for the new episode, Ethan?
Absolutely.
You
As
ready for
long
this
as you tell
episode?
me, is this knowledge or is this just going to be a bunch of bull crap nonsense?
Well, I'll let you decide.
Okay. I will cast judgment once I hear.
Okay, I will say, I'm going to start off the episode by saying that I've tried manifesting spontaneous combustion and I'm still here. So,
Well, now that you've let me know, I will try for you. I'll keep both fingers crossed and the little matchstick in my mind.
okay. So,
But,
yeah, today's episode is spontaneous human combustion.
oh no.
So, we're back to death, guys. Sorry.
You
Not
know,
sorry.
we had a good run there. We hopped into the supernatural, a little of the, spiritual afterlife, whatever. I'm glad to just be back on the road of singed corpses. So
There you go.
let's
Yeah.
kick it off. Spontaneous human combustion.
That's right. Okay, so the most notable case or the most known case of spontaneous human combustion is Mary Reeser. So most of you probably already know the story, but I will quickly summarize it for those that don't know. Mary Reeser's son visited her on the night of July 1st, 1951, not knowing it would be his last time seeing her alive. When her landlady visited the next morning to deliver a telegram, she stated that the door handle was too hot to touch and she couldn't hold her hand on it for longer than a few seconds. So she called the fire department, and the firefighters entered the apartment to find that it had been completely filled with smoke and there was soot all over the walls and ceiling and everything. I did find a Tampa Bay Times article, and that says, quote, amid the rubble, police found coil springs from the chair and part of Reeser's backbone. Her left foot sat in a pile, still wearing a black silk slipper. Her skull, reports say, had shrunken to the size of a cup.
A cup?
A cup.
What kind of cup?
I don't know.
Sippy
like
cup.
a sippy cup. It could have been like a coffee mug or like one of those big gulps, I don't know. They didn't specify. I'm going to say probably like a teacup or a coffee cup.
Absolutely. Some kind of ceramic drinkware. But okay.
Yeah.
That's horrifying. I kind of feel bad now. I'm not familiar with this at all.
You're not?
No, but
Okay.
that's so graphic.
Okay, well, there is a little bit more. There are also pictures, which I'm kind of like on the fence of whether or not we share the pictures or not, because it is like somebody's, family member, and I don't really feel comfortable sharing that on like our social media and stuff. But.
For sure. I mean, if anybody wants to just Bing it, they can go
Yeah,
Bing it on
you
Yahoo.
can definitely search that. Bing.
Yeah, Bing it on Yahoo or whatever.
Okay, so there's a little bit more info here. So, continuing the Tampa Bay Times article, firefighters found evidence of extreme heat. Bare candle wicks towered above puddles of melted wax. Smudges of smoke had stained the tops of the walls. Warped electric switches lined the room. Lower down, the walls were clean and the electric switches looked normal. Reeser's newspapers sat untouched next to her. The sheets on her bed were still white. Reeser's story is perhaps the strangest unsolved mystery in Tampa Bay history. The case has been documented in magazine articles, documentaries, and books, but questions remain. End quote.
Wow. So we know definitively then that it was not a candle accident because the wicks were fine. The heat just melted the wax. We know it wasn't something inflammatory that she read in the newspaper because the newspaper was untouched.
Yes.
No bears were in the bed complaining about hot porridge or anything because the linens were still white.
Correct.
This is pretty freaky.
It is. It definitely is. And the pictures are even more strange. There have been a couple other, well, overall, there have been about 200 cases of spontaneous human combustion dating back to the 1800s. And that kind of blew my mind when I looked that up.
That's outpacing the cave deaths from our 500,000 abandoned tunnels episode. More people are spontaneously combusting. That's wild.
Oh my gosh. That's true.
Yeah, it's like two.
That's wild.
2 to 10 a year or something like that back then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I guess like 150,000. And you're like, oh, it's like 2 to 10 people.
Yeah, almost nobody. Almost all of them underwater. And I would say we don't have any proof then that those people who disappeared in the caves didn't spontaneously combust, other than that they were under the sea. Da 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 da. So you know.
You have a point. Sorry, we were thinking.
Yeah,
we were in deep thought.
For sure, thumbnail.
Yeah. Okay, so I've got a couple other like quick little blips of other cases that have happened. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So Margaret Hogan, an 89-year-old widow who lived alone on Prussia Street in Dublin, Ireland, was discovered severely burned on March 28, 1970. Plastic flowers on a nearby table had melted, and a television with a damaged screen was found about 12 feet away from her armchair, where only her ashen remains sat. Apart from this, the room remained largely undisturbed. Her lower legs and feet were surprisingly unharmed. A coal fire had been lit in the fireplace the day before, but no definitive link between that fire and Margaret Hogan's fatal blaze could be established. An inquest on April 3, 1970, ruled her cause of death as burning, with the fire's origin labeled as unknown.
That's
so
scary to think about too.
yeah,
So just a pair of boots with the legs still in it, and everything else just ashes melted into the lazy boy.
yes. On November 24th, 1979, over Thanksgiving weekend, Beatrice Oxy, a 51-year-old woman, was discovered burned to death in her residence in Bolingbrook, Illinois, USA.
Been there, yeah.
Another one in 1980, Henry Thomas, a 73-year-old man, was found deceased due to severe burns in the living room of his council house on the Rousseau estate in South Wales. His body was largely consumed by fire, leaving only his skull and parts of his legs below the knees intact, still clothed in socks and trousers. The chair he had been sitting in was also significantly damaged.
So it's not just limited to the U.S. here, even up in Wales.
Yep. And again, there's kind of like consistency here too, because their limbs, some of their limbs are still remaining, and their head. So it's like in the I can't think, like the torso area that kind of seems to be the area, which is interesting.
Absolutely. No, that is kind of wild. I like also that the fire seems to just give up after the knees. It just is like, the ROI is not here.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, and then the last one, in December of 2010, Michael Faraday, age 76 and residing in County Galway, Ireland, was officially attributed by the coroner to have died from spontaneous combustion. Dr. McLaughlin, during the inquiry into Flaherty's, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, Flaherty's death, asserted, quote, "After a thorough investigation, I am compelled to categorize this incident as spontaneous human combustion, a phenomenon that remains unexplained," end quote. So like the next time that I hang out with Emily, my mortician friend, I know she's not a coroner, but I'm going to ask her if she's ever I'm going to ask her what her thoughts are on this. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, She obviously works closely with coroners and other people just associated with the
Right.
business of death. So I'm sure stories like this, even if there are only 200 of them, they probably travel pretty fast, pretty far, and hang around for a pretty long time. So it would be
Mm-hmm.
interesting to get that perspective.
Yeah. Okay, so Ethan, have you ever spontaneously combusted?
Not so far.
Okay, good. Okay. So if you have ever spontaneously combusted, feel free to write into us at niche knowledge and nonsense at gmail.com. With that being said, are you ready to spontaneously combust these nuts? I
Oh
don't know
my
that I'm going to
god.
keep that.
Bailey. Okay. All right. So one tiny little part of me thought about saying that verbatim when you said, "Have you ever?" When you asked if I'd ever spontaneously combusted, you might see my little
Oh.
jugular vein stood out, and I resisted. Oh my god. Okay.
Okay. So, what is spontaneous human combustion? Well, it is a pseudoscientific concept that suggests a living or recently deceased human body can catch fire without any clear external cause of ignition.
Hmm.
Apart from documented cases, this phenomenon is also depicted in literature, where both reported incidents and fictional accounts often highlight similar circumstances and the condition of the victim's remains. So we kind of just got done talking about that, where it's like the torso is typically what's kind of like mostly ash, and then it's like the legs and the head that's still kind of there. So I found an article from December 15th of 2017. And this 70-year-old guy burst into flames on a street in London.
On the street?
On the street.
Okay, most of these have been like alone in a
In
recliner.
their
So
home.
yeah.
Yeah. So this guy's just like in the middle of the street. So I'm going to read a little bit from the article here. Quote, pedestrians watched in horror as they saw John Nolan ablaze in Orchard Place, North London, near Tottenham Hotspur's White Hart Lane football ground, just after 1 p.m. Some desperately tried to put out the fire as others called the emergency services, the Daily Mail reports. Mr. Nolan, who was an unmarried retired construction worker from County Mayo, Ireland, that is now the third person from Ireland who has spontaneously combusted, by the way, was flown to Broomfield Hospital in Essex by air ambulance, but died the next day. His body was 65% covered in third-degree burns. London Fire Brigade specialist investigators were unable to find anything at the scene that could have sparked the fire. No property or anyone else was harmed in the fire. Detectives are appealing for witnesses to come forward to try to explain how Mr. Nolan came to catch the flames.
That one's very scary because it was, again, now we've seen somebody out in the middle of yonder, just a regular retiree, people around enough that they were able to be like quickly rushed to the hospital and just popped into
Yeah.
flames, burst into
I don't
flames.
even know what I would do in that situation. I mean, obviously, like, I would I would probably try to help
death,
them, but
probably.
like,
Oh, as a
but like,
bystander.
oh yeah,
Yeah,
no, not
okay.
me burning.
I'd be like, I guess I'd pull out a cigarette and be like, "Oi, mate, can I have a light?" Because I'd be English. Can you
We're
imagine?
gonna get canceled so hard.
Oh, no. It was a joke. I wouldn't really
I
try to
know.
light a cigarette off a burning person. If I,
I know,
was, then
Ethan.
I wouldn't
I
admit to
just
it on
made
a
a joke about.
podcast.
Yeah. No, I'm okay. So there's a little bit more here. You ready?
I'm so ready. Go on.
Okay. So there's a police officer named PC Damien 8 Amer. He is the investigating officer on the case. He said, quote, we have spoken with a number of witnesses who saw Mr. Nolan ablaze, but we have yet to establish how the fire started. Mr. Nolan was a well-liked member of the community, and none of our inquiries so far have indicated that he had been involved in a dispute of any sort. nor does any account given by witnesses suggest that he had been in contact with another person at the time of the fire. End quote. The article goes on to give a little bit of information on him and his family. But it does end with, quote, baffled investigators turn to spontaneous human combustion as the only logical explanation when people appear to burst in flames without any visible source of ignition. End quote.
Very scary stuff. So well-loved member of the
Yes.
community. So it wasn't probably like somebody just catching like holy fire or hellfire or paying a penance for a deal with the devil. We're talking a regular person
A
who,
regular person.
yeah, that's,
Yeah.
I don't know, that's pretty freaking scary.
It is. So I found an article by this guy named Joe Nickel, who's got a PhD.
I trust him, was Nickel got to say.
Yeah. So you will also like all of this information. So he is also a senior research fellow of the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry. They call themselves the CSI, and an investigative files columnist for Skeptical Inquirer. Also a former stage magician, private investigator, and a teacher.
My gosh, what a
He is
credibility roller
I know.
coaster. It's going up and down and up and down.
And he has also published several books. So this is Joe Nichols, like what he had to say about the guy in London just catching on fire. Quote, the Daily Mail account related how a 70-year-old Irish pensioner, John Nolan, was seen ablaze on Sunday, just after 1 p.m. on a North London street. Horrified onlookers tried to assist, but the badly burned victim, though soon airlifted to a hospital, died the next day. The fact that his body was 65% covered in third-degree burns was a strong indication that he was burned externally, not from some imagined internal combustion. Nevertheless, police investigators lacked any clue as to how the fire did originate. A post-mortem examination revealed only that the cause of death was severe burns, and a formal inquest was set for the following March 13th. I have had experience investigating such cases from 1982 to present. In 1984, forensic analyst John F. Fisher and I reported the results of our 2.5-year study of 30 historic cases of alleged spontaneous human combustion from 1725 to 1982. Publishing in the forensic journal, The Fire and Arson Investigator, we found no credible evidence for such a phenomenon, except in cases in which crucial data was woefully lacking. We determined that plausible, naturalistic explanations could easily be provided.
Did they provide them?
So we'll kind of get to that. But he's kind of like, he goes on to say, to draw a conclusion from an occurrence being unexplained is to engage in a logical fallacy known as, quote, an argument from ignorance, end quote. Therefore, I was not surprised by the investigative outcome of the Nolan case. The coroner first concluded that Nolan's death was not a deliberate act by himself or anyone else, and that a flammable liquid did not aid the fire. Coroner Andrew Walker then told the North London Coroner's Court, quote, it's likely that Mr. Nolan set his clothes on fire whilst lighting a cigarette, end quote. He was found with a pack of cigarettes and 2 lighters.
Could happen, could happen.
So I guess, it could happen. But I feel like I have had, an occasional cigarette, and I've accidentally got like ash that's still on fire on my clothes, and it doesn't set my whole body ablaze.
No.
You know what I mean?
No, it doesn't. It's hard enough. It's hard enough to keep your cigarette lit sometimes. I mean,
Yeah, if it's windy.
I guess it also depends on what kind of fabric you were wearing. I don't really know. Maybe.
True.
I don't.
Maybe if it was a wool sweater.
Wool
is very flammable, right?
No. It's like fireproof.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They'll even use
Oh,
it
I
as
didn't know that.
insulation. At least like sheep's wool. We had a bunch of bad sheep's wool, like 4,000 pounds of it. a while back. It was like 50 years old and it had just been wet. It was really moldy. We tried to put it out in the sun, dry it out, and burn it. It would not burn. The stuff's like invincible. But I mean, which
Whoa.
makes this just even more unlikely. And I don't know if I associate
Yeah.
Londoners with wearing wool and find stuff like that. But also, I don't know, working in construction, contracting, whenever I'm outside working on like landscaping or whatever, you get sap on yourself or you get a bunch of ash grease, whatever. We all use either gasoline or kerosene, to clean
True.
ourselves up, and it splashes all over the place. You could have some kind, but they also said that there wasn't any accelerant that they could identify. So
Right.
even though a retired construction worker or anything like that who might be more inclined to being covered in a happenstance accelerant, it was not
Mm-hmm.
found on the remains.
Right.
There's
Um,
no explanation. I'm just going to say it right now.
okay. Well, we're going to hear a little bit more from this Joe Nickel guy because he does kind of go on to give some more of what his study showed.
Okay.
So he goes on, quote, in our historic study, we had encountered similar cases. For instance, a woman in 1744 was found partially incinerated. She had been reportedly intoxicated and left her bedroom wearing a cotton gown to smoke a pipe. Her gown probably ignited, and her own body fat appears to have aided the burning since a fatty stain was reported. This occurrence went uninterrupted, unlike that of Mr. Nolan, resulting in further destruction of the body. Clothing can be quite susceptible to fire, while wool is the least flammable natural fiber.
Oh, there we go. See, I'm not spouting nonsense. I
No, you're
learned that
not.
organically through life.
Yeah. I learn something new every day. That's why we do this podcast, is because we don't know everything, and, we learn something new every
We
time.
be learning for sure.
Yeah. So while wool is the least flammable natural fiber, cotton is highly flammable, catching fire easily and burning very quickly. Silk and linen are almost as flammable as are cellulose-based man-made fibers like rayon and acetate. Loose textured fabrics will catch fire and burn more easily than tighter woven ones. Although information is not given on Nolan's clothing, the postulated scenario given by the coroner seems the most likely one based on all the evidence. Certainly, the notion of spontaneous human combustion is once again vanquished, as it must eternally be once essential facts are learned or can be reasonably postulated. End quote. Very big words, Joe Nickel.
Yeah, hiding behind that vocabulary, Joe Nickel.
Yeah. How many nickels do you think he has?
I mean, he's a doctor, so it's probably safe to say quite
Maybe
a
more
few.
than two?
Yeah, definitely
Yeah.
more than two. Between two and, I don't know.
Yeah. So, okay, so I did a little bit more digging on this guy because if because my thought process was, okay, Joe Nickel apparently did a study with a forensic analyst named Fisher on spontaneous human combustion. I was like, I should probably just look it up and see what that's all about.
Yeah, what they gotta say.
So there was actually a lot in my head almost exploded. Maybe that was kind of what they were wanting to go for, was like cause it to happen. I don't know.
I just know they would have said, yeah, head explosion, 100% natural and explainable causes.
Right. Actually, is it true that low frequencies can cause your head to explode?
I don't know. I
Maybe that'll be another episode.
I don't feel
Um,
I don't feel like that's true. I mean, you can get some pretty low wavelengths, and I feel like we're immersed
I
in those all
vaguely
the
remember
time.
I vaguely remember reading something about like high frequencies that our human ears can't hear. If it's something that's like continuous, like it can cause hearing damage, but I wasn't sure about that. So science investigator Joe Nickel and this forensic analyst guy, John Fisher, conducted a 2-year study on 30 spontaneous human combustion cases in 1984. And it is called, it was published in the Journal of the International Association of Arson Investigators. So one of the earliest cases took place in February of 1725. The burned remains of a Madame Millet were found on her kitchen floor. A portion of her had also burned. Although her husband was subsequently convicted of murdering her, a higher court reversed the decision, attributing the death to spontaneous combustion. Actually, the woman was one who, quote, got intoxicated every day, had gone to the kitchen to warm herself, and was discovered only a 1.5 foot distance from the hearth. Therefore, Thomas Stevenson, in his treatise on medical jurisprudence, suggested her clothes had accidentally ignited. In contrast to this was another early case, the 1731 death of the Countess Bandy of Cesena, Italy. She was a 62-year-old woman. Excuse me. She was a 62-year-old woman who was not given to intoxication. Although her body was supposedly reduced to a heap of ashes, part of her head remained and her legs and arms were not burned. The ashes contained a greasy and stinking moisture. Soot floated in the air, and from the window there trickled down a greasy, loathsome, yellowish liquor with an unusual stink. Oh. However, this case, which served as one of Dickens' sources, seems quite explicable when further data are added. On the floor was an empty ash-covered lamp on which the Countess had apparently fallen, its burning oil no doubt aiding in the fire. So
Gotcha. So this is interesting, tossing in some variety of other things, kind of, I think, mixing in mundane, explainable deaths with the other, but, it's not a 1 = 1 situation necessarily. We've got specific notes from the coroners saying that there were no accelerants involved in some of the other combustion cases.
Right.
But before that, I just wanted to real-time fact check us right here. You were correct about the dangers of prolonged low-frequency sound. Apparently, and this is a nice Google AI overview, but low-frequency sound waves, also known as infrasound, can be dangerous to humans and can even cause death if exposure is prolonged. Infrasound is sound that humans can't hear, but it can still affect our bodies. The most dangerous frequency of infrasound is 7 hertz because it is the same frequency as the brain's median alpha rhythm. So apparently, if you're exposed to those sounds, you can't hear them, but they affect our nervous system and cause disorientation, anxiety, panic, bowel spasms, nausea, and even organ rupture and death. So is that the brown note?
Dude, I don't know.
This is
I don't know.
I apologize.
This
I
is
shouldn't
wild.
speak out my ass because apparently a 7 hertz sound can literally cause your organs to explode.
Oh my gosh. I want to know how they discovered that though.
Right? Also, I know there's a huge difference in everything, but don't headphones go down to 20 hertz? I feel like 7 hertz isn't necessarily that low.
I'm not sure, but I mean, sound waves are already kind of if you're going to go to a concert, a live concert, you should wear earplugs or soundproof headphones, because prolonged exposure to that can damage your hearing. If you go to a concert and the venue is really small or they have the music really loud, and you don't wear ear protection, you might not even really be able to hear the next day.
No, that is wild.
So,
and again,
yeah.
real-time Googling, humans can hear as low as 12 hertz. So just 5 hertz lower than that can literally cause your organs to blow up.
That's insane.
That is wild.
Okay,
Be careful
I was
out there.
right. I'm not stupid anymore.
You are way to go. Slow clap, slow clap. I will make sure to speak in a higher voice going forward because I don't want to kill anybody with my rich, silky bass tones.
All right. So they go through and talk about several other cases, and they try to debunk them. And their conclusion on the Mary Reeser case, I thought was interesting. So they said it was, out of all of them, the best documented case of alleged spontaneous human combustion. And they attribute it to a deadly combination of a lit cigarette, flammable nightclothes, and sleeping pills.
Because it appears in a couple of these cases like they burned with no protest, right? Like they're still arranged like in peaceful positions on chairs. Mm-hmm. So,
and the notion, it goes on to say, quote, and the notion of preternatural combustibility must yield to the evidence supporting the candle effect, otherwise known as the wicking effect, in which a body's fat liquefies and thus participates in its own destruction. However, although even a lean body contains a significant amount of fat, other factors may be involved in a given instance. We therefore urge investigation of cases on their own evidence. The operative word is investigation, not merely debunking. My bad. Although the former may surely result in the latter in instances of allegedly spontaneous human combustion. End quote.
A lot to unpack there, but it seems like they've made their decision, huh?
Yes. I did find an FBI handbook from 1997 where spontaneous human combustion is mentioned. And it goes on to say, quote, spontaneous human combustion, there's no scientific evidence that the human body suddenly bursts into flame. When this phenomenon is alleged, the typical victim is elderly, partially incapacitated, and in many cases, obese. Commonly, the torso is cremated with the head and feet remaining. An examination of these cases has shown that ignition is the result of an accident, such as careless smoking. The victim is overcome by smoke, and the fire progresses as a slow, smoldering fire, consuming the victim's clothing and other fuels such as bedding and upholstery. The victim's body fat begins to render, and if the body is positioned right, the rendered fat fuels the fire. The body is slowly consumed. This type of fire is affected by the insulative qualities of the materials burned, which would be like the clothing and the furnishings, producing a smoking flame with a low heat output. The localized temperatures are high enough to destroy the tissue and bone, but insufficient heat is generated to ignite nearby combustibles. The manner in which the body burns has been referred to as the candle or wick effect.
I guess that kind of makes sense, but I mean, it also is a little bit funky because you see a lot of horror stories about you drop a cigarette on a blanket and your whole home goes up in flames, but somehow if you drop it on your belly, then it just burns low and slow. I don't get it.
I don't know.
I'm not a physicist, though.
Yeah. So, overall, this seems to be an old tale that many people used to fear would happen to them, whether they thought God would smite them or from simply eating Taco Bell. But now that science has advanced, we're closer to understanding the human wick effect and how that's all possible. So basically, the conditions have to be just right for it to work. And that's kind of why it's not as common anymore. But I still can't believe that guy in London. That whole thing.
Yeah, I don't think he was up walking around. I don't think he was on sleeping pills and whiskey and cigarettes.
Yeah.
I don't know.
We should ask him.
Well, I wish we could. He's perished of natural causes, though. Supernatural causes.
Supernatural, yeah. So,
Okay,
yeah.
so far this is extremely disturbing. One hand, like I totally get, I'm all on board with. I feel like a lot of ghost howling sounds are old pipes and old ductwork, or a raccoon giving birth underneath your trailer, that kind of stuff right there. But it's interesting that these people, especially with acronyms like, what was it? CSI? Was that it?
Yes.
Are so invested in making sure that there's absolutely no outlet or allowance for the mysterious in these cases, and that they don't even want you to think about it, and they want to make you feel stupid or sound stupid for even looking into it. What is CSI hiding? What are we up against right here? Is this related to CIA? Like, what's going on? You know what I'm saying? Like, why are they taking
Yeah.
such a hardline stance against stuff like this?
So they are not. I do have a link to their website. It's not affiliated to CIA or anything like that.
That we know of.
Right.
There was a time when they
It
said LSD wasn't affiliated with the CIA. Look where that got us. MK Ultra, right?
That's true. Which we should do an episode on that
Right.
at some point. That maybe. Well, I don't know. Will they
I
like,
don't
come steal
I don't
us
want to
or,
get
like, Men
nerfed
in
by
Black
the government. I want to stay around. I
Yeah.
love the government and paying taxes with my dollars.
Yeah. Me too. I love it so much. So, okay, I'm on their website right now. It's not too crazy. I mean, it's mostly like, I don't want to say an opinion article, but they do have sources and stuff for their claims. I don't know. I do kind of feel like he is making people feel dumb, though, for believing it. Which, if it is deemed a pseudoscience, then maybe he has a right to, like with cryonics.
I guess so, but what you got to
So
look into who deems it a pseudoscience too, like freaking Bob Nickleby or
true.
whatever his name is.
What was his name? Joe Nickel.
Oh, okay, Joe
Yeah.
Nickel. I don't know. I don't. Is he? This is the guy was a failed magician, right?
I don't know that he was failed. He definitely has. He wears a lot of hats. I'll say that.
Oh, okay. I love it. Okay, I'll take it. I don't want to discredit Mr. Nickel either. I'm sure you're putting a lot more work and research into this than I am too, so I don't mean to cast a disparaging word, and I hope that we could still be friends, in a different life where we don't disagree on such a fundamental level.
Yeah. Well, okay. I just Googled his name again, and he has a book called Real Life X Files. It's about investigating the paranormal.
I don't know.
That's
Anybody trying to
interesting.
sell a book, I also get a tiny, tiny, tiny little bit skeptical as well.
Yeah. I don't know
Yeah, I
now.
don't know either.
I mean, if just because someone believes in the paranormal and investigates that, it shouldn't,
No, I don't.
you
I don't
know, take away their
discount them. I think there
credit.
should be an equal
Yeah.
number of people who support the supernatural and try to disprove the supernatural. You want that push pull, and then you want about 70% of the people to be centrist in their beliefs with the supernatural right in there. There's got to be
Right.
a little treasure pot to try to recruit people over to your philosophy. This only extends as
Right.
far as cryptids, supernatural occurrence, and everything else, and shouldn't be applied to other things.
Yeah. That's a good take on
Yeah,
it.
thank you very much. I appreciate it. Not like some of
You're
these
welcome.
freaking bad takes we got from Jack freaking Nicholson or whatever.
Yeah. So, and I guess he has a second book called More Real Life X Files.
Ah! Good
And
call.
yeah, interesting.
I actually would buy this book though because it does sound interesting, And, if we don't share the same opinions, I still like a loud, confident opinion. So I'll have to check that out.
That's true. That was 9 pages of research.
Yeah, that was
I think I just talked really fast.
wild. The amount of articles and stuff you dug up for this is so funky. I just can't believe there are this many cases of spontaneous combustion that they decide to label them spontaneous instead of, the actual crime scene investigators who were there trying to attribute it to anything that they observed.
Right. So there was I don't know if it's a newspaper or what it is, but it was called the British Medical Journal. And this article I found was from June 18th, 1938. And he kind of covers... So this individual named Gavin Thurston wrote in here about spontaneous combustion. And he says... There are basically, which I'm summarizing right now, there are a lot of similarities between all of the supposed cases of spontaneous human combustion. Number 1 being the victim was a chronic alcoholic. 2, they're elderly. They typically are older females, actually. 3, the body most likely came into contact with a substance, and that kind of caused the burn to start. He was saying when was this? In 1938 that it wasn't spontaneous. But he's kind of like trying to make sense of it. But the other similarities that he made were the hands and feet usually fall off. The fire caused very little damage to combustible things in contact with the body. And then there's like a greasy residue and ashes that have a very foul smell.
Sure. And I think it's easy to kind of go that route for a couple of reasons. Number 1, attributing alcohol to it. I mean, not all of us, but some of us have been there, after 5, 6 drinks, whatever, you start spilling 20% down your bib, and
yeah,
you can
and puking
end up
in
with
your
that.
hands.
Yeah, exactly. And then if you fall asleep smoking a cigarette and you've spilled whiskey down your V-neck, that's an accelerant right there. It could be that simple. And then, they talked about body fat composition playing into it as well. And okay, for those who aren't watching visually, I think Bailey's cat just walked up and licked her eyeball very kindly and then walked away.
She didn't lick it. She just like touched her nose to it.
Oh, that's sweet.
I don't know. She does that. That's like her kisses.
Oh, I gotcha. So does she do this thing? My cats do this where after like 10:30 they start coming out and trying to like usher me to bed because they want to snooze.
Yeah, I don't know that she'll stay like this.
Nice scarf.
I don't know if you can you hear her?
Yeah, I hear her purring. Yeah, that's a rumbly cat.
Don't lick the microphone.
Okay, that was pure ASMR. That shout out to the SM7B. When she was like gnawing on it, you really got some of the rumbles. So that'll be terrific.
Ugh.
But no, the amount
get some sanitizing spray.
Again, the sources you can put on this are just obscure, which, I mean, most of our topics, I think, are off the wall enough that, I wasn't able to get as many, like true gnome sighting scholarly articles or cross analysis. But
I wonder why.
If I was gonna guess, I would have guessed there was more cross analysis on gnomes than there would have been spontaneous combustion. So it's just wild that it's so much the opposite.
No, it is wild. And I'll definitely it's hard. Well, I feel silly adding links on Instagram because you can't click like in a description. But I'll definitely include them in the YouTube show notes.
Sure.
So if you're interested in looking and going through any of the articles that we've talked about in this episode, you're more than welcome to do that. I did have a lot of fun, but there was definitely a lot of reading that I did. And there was also a number of them were opinion articles, and I tried to stay away from those. I tried to stick with legit, news sites or things that have been published in like medical stuff.
Absolutely.
So,
And honestly, I feel like this isn't the worst way to go. It sounds like most of them were kind of mega zonked by the time they,
honestly,
caught fire. Again, if you are not squeamish, I would definitely look this up and check out some of these photos, especially some of the older ones are very, very neat and on merit of being, poor quality film cameras. I think they're not quite as grotesque as, a modern image would be. But
yeah.
it's still bad enough that I wouldn't be comfortable like posting it on Instagram or anything. So hop over and you can bing that on Yahoo if you want to see.
All right. Well, do you have any questions, Ethan?
I got a lot of questions, mostly for this Nickelback magician guy, but
Joe Nickel.
until what's Pumpernickel or I'll get it eventually. Until I read about the real X-Files, I will withhold any judgment though, but maybe we can get in some Twitter beef or something.
Yeah. I don't know. He's got to be pretty old now. I don't know that he's got Twitter or whatever.
You never know.
Joe Nickel.
Shout out.
Joe Nickel, if you're listening, send us an email at niche-knowledge-and-nonsense@gmail.com.
gmail.com. We will get you on the show. All right. Thanks for putting this episode together. I am going to sleep very lightly with no cigarette in my mouth for once because I am scared off of my
For
gourd.
once?
Yeah. I'm not going to be dribbling the whiskey. I am not going to be wearing combustible fabrics. I am not going to be smoking a cigarette as I fall asleep off of half a bottle of Ambien. I am just gonna chill flat on a mattress.
Yep. There you go. Well, yeah, it was a lot of fun to put this episode together. I know it's not as long as our other ones are, but I feel like there's a lot of information
Chick, you
there
got a weird,
to absorb. So
jacked up idea of fun, but okay, I'm here for it.
It actually was because I started researching this when I was in a coffee shop and I was like looking at the Mary Reeser pictures and I'm like, maybe I should get like one of those things to put on my computer screen so people can't like see what I'm looking at right now.
Right. They just look over and your screen is split in half. One is Mary Reeser images and the bottom half is a live stream of Subway Surfers. And...
No, it's me with AirPods just like scrolling through, like, typing and looking at dead people
just
pictures.
vibing,
Just
looking at dead people. What can you do?
Yep.
All right. Awesome.
Well, yeah. Thanks so much for listening.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everybody. Find us on Instagram at NKNPod. Check us out on YouTube if you want to see some bigger video panels. And we will see you again in a couple of weeks.
Absolutely. And also, if you like our intro and outro song, make sure to check out Eric Safaro. You can find him on any streaming service. He's got some awesome music, and he's a really nice person.
Absolutely. Thanks, Eric.